Next is section 7, subsection 2, which is a negative list and has all the activities which basically are out of scope of supply, and this list is given in schedule 3. So these are all exclusions, and supply exceeds what? It exceeds, sorry, not exceeds, excludes bench flag L. What is bench flag L? Let's see one by one. B for bond to bond transfer. Bond to bond transfer. What is bond to bond transfer now? It is the supply of warehoused goods before it clears for home consumption. Okay, so when the goods have arrived here in India and these goods are warehoused, but they have not cleared home consumption, and if it is sold at that point, if it is supplied, then it is not considered as a supply. It is excluded from the definition of supply as per section 7 subsection 2. Next, E, services by employee to employer in the course of employment. There's nothing much for me to explain here. Third, N for non-taxable territory. Supply of goods from one non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory without goods entering India. For example, Mr. Raj, he purchases goods from China and he sells it to another person, let's say Sham, who is in US. So he buys goods from China and sells it to Sham, and these goods from China, it directly goes to US. It does not enter India, right? So he has sold from one non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory without the goods entering India, and this is what N, that is non-taxable territory supply, is about. I hope you understood the example. Now C for services by court, tribunal, including CDRC, which is just like a court. Basically, so their fees will be free of GST. Okay. Fees of court, fees of tribunal, including CDRC, will be free of GST, and it is not a supply. H for high sea sale. What is high sea sale? It is supply of goods by either importer or consignee to any person by giving documents. For example, let's say bill of lading. So what happens here is the goods are purchased from China. It is on the way to India. It is in the sea. Goods are in the sea. Now the person who is importing the goods sells these goods to a person in India by giving him documents like bill of lading while the goods are still in the sea, which is why it is called high sea sale. This is what high sea sale is. Okay. Next is F for funeral, mortuary, burial services, including transportation of the deceased. So it's like, the person is now dead, and now at least he has to be free from GST, right? So funeral, mortuary, burial services are all out of scope of supply, including transportation of the deceased, including transportation of the dead body. Now L for sale of land and building. Sale of land is free of GST, not a supply. Now, in case of sale of building, we have to check if the consideration with if the entire consideration has been received after a particular date or before a particular date. Now, what is the particular date? Completion certificate of first occupancy, whichever is earlier. Let me explain this. I want to elaborate this a little more. Okay, let's say for example there is a project of 60 flats. Okay, I am constructing a building with 60 flats, and I am commencing this on commencement of the construction happens when 25th 10 2020. 19. Okay, and on 25th of May 2020, between these two dates, let's say around 15 flats have been booked. 15 flats have been booked between these two dates, and on this particular day, any one buyer, he occupies the space. So this is first occupation by any one buyer on this date. Okay, and next date, let's say on 30th 12 2020, between these two dates, 25 more flats have been booked. 25 more flats have been booked. And on this day, what happens? CC certificate of completion is obtained on this date. Okay, and let's take one more date. Let's say 31st 1 2021. Between these two dates, the remaining flats have been booked. 20 flats have been booked. Now, what does the provision say? The provision says that if the entire consideration is received after completion certificate or first occupancy, whichever is earlier. Completion certificate, first occupancy, whichever is earlier. Which is earlier? This date. So this is the date we need to see. If the entire consideration has been received after this date, that is in case of 25 flats and 20 flats, so 25 plus 20, 45 flats, these two will be excluded from supply, that is no GST, right? But if either full or part consideration has been received before this date, that is first occupancy or completion certificate date, whichever is earlier, if it has been received the consideration whether fully or partly before this date, then this will be considered as a supply and GST will be payable. I hope you have understood this. Okay, see. So sale of land, no GST. Sale of building, if the entire consideration received after completion certificate or first occupancy, whichever is earlier, then no GST, it is not a supply. But if full or part consideration received before such date, then GST will be liable. It is a supply of service, and we will charge GST on the full value. It's not like don't um, think that if only part consideration was received before, then GST is payable only on that particular amount. No, it will be uh, payable on the full value itself. Next is A, for actionable claims other than LGB, lottery, gambling, betting. So these three are not exempt. Actionable claims other than these three are exempt from supply. They are exempt from GST, not considered supply, but LGB is considered as supply. Okay. Next, G, for functions performed by government. I have segregated these into 4 different categories here. Functions performed by MPs, MLAs, MLC, etc. out of scope. Duties performed by constitution post holder, nominated posts like CNAG, out of scope. Duties performed by MCD members, chairperson, directors of government establishment, out of scope. Here we don't consider, we are not talking about employees, but even if it is employee, it is already out of scope as per E here, employed to employer in the course of employment, right? Next is sovereign function of government other than specified for services. here we government, by government we mean CG, SG, UT, LA. Now what are these four services which are not in the negative list? Department of Post, transportation of goods, transportation of passengers, airport, port services, and supply of service to business entity. Apart from these four, other services, sovereign functions of government are all exempt, but these four will be considered as supply of service. Now, last L for liquor license, this is an amendment. Liquor license by state government is also out of scope. So this was bench flag, schedule 3, negative list, out of scope. B for bond to bond transfer, E for employee to employer, N for entity to entity, C for court, tribunal, high C sale, F for funeral, L for sale of land building, A for actionable claims, G for government functions, and L liquor license by state government. Next